Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Prince of Persia has been a long-running series going back since 1989 when the first Prince of Persia game was developed. And come on, look at this.
I call it bold and bright.
It's kind of beautiful in a weird way. Fast forward to 2024 with the release of Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, a 2D Metroidvania that seems to take the franchise into an interesting direction. The Metroidvania genre has been having a resurgence ever since the release of Hollow Knight back in 2017. There are many games that follow this trend, which is great for those fans of the genre, but at the same time it makes it harder for those games to stand out. Which brings the question, does Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown stand out amongst the other games in this style? Let's go ahead and blast through the Citadel, avoid traps, and swing our way into the world of Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. The Lost Crown follows the story of Sargon, a young member of a group of warriors called the Immortals. They are a powerful group that is sworn to protect Persia at any means necessary. The Prince of Persia, Ghassan, decides to get kidnapped, nice going, so it is up to the Immortals to go to Mount Kof and rescue him. However, when the group gets there, the place is off. There are reanimated corpses and some sections of the area are distorted. Time moves at a different pace here, and the team find themselves trapped inside due to a weird time distortion. It's up to Sargon and the gang to get Ghassan out of there before they are trapped forever. Sargon as a character is good for what the story needs, but I do wish they gave him a bit more depth. That said, his relation to the main antagonist is what brings him up as a character from a standard protag to an interesting character. I won't spoil who the main villain is, but I found them and Sargon's dynamic intriguing. The rest of the Immortals, on the other hand, are fine. They work for the story, but they didn't really get much development, which is fine, but they are not as memorable because of it. Thankfully, the world in The Lost Crown is pretty populated with friendly NPCs. I say pretty populated because most of this genre doesn't have a lot of friendly NPCs, and The Lost Crown has more than you would think. That's not to say that the whole place is bustling, but there's definitely people to talk to around the world, and I kind of think that's nice. Most Metroidvanias have this feeling of isolation, whereas The Lost Crown doesn't have this atmosphere, which I actually appreciate. I personally love when games opt for stylish visuals, and The Lost Crown has style. The art style itself is so smooth and clean. Character models look great with some exaggerated features to distinguish each character. The backgrounds are also incredibly well done. Sometimes the camera will pan out and show off the gorgeous view, and these shots are great. But the most visually impressive part about this game is the visual effects. My goodness, are they some of the most striking effects I have seen in an Ubisoft game. You can see this stuff when you're dashing or parrying. The special animations are so cool. It really enhances the art style. I love when you do a special parry on an attack and then all of a sudden Sargon does this crazy killer move that looks so anime. It really complements the art style. Performance wise, the game runs buttery smooth with occasional little bugs here and there, but nothing that hurts the experience in any way. The animation in general is also really slick, with the main character Sargon doing flips and slides that look so clean. There are also some really cool enemy designs, and some that are downright creepy. I love it. In general, this game looks really good. Sure, you can argue that some of the textures are a bit smooth, or the character models might not be your jam, but it's a great looking game, and I think this art style works for Prince of Persia, and I wouldn't mind seeing something like this, or even a bit more stylized in the future. I vastly prefer this over the more realistic Prince of Persia games. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is a 2.5D Metroidvania. A Metroidvania, for those unaware, is a platforming game that features a big interconnected map with many different areas that will gradually be unlocked through new abilities that you acquire throughout the game. It is a formula that stands the test of time, and it's becoming one of my favorite genres. It's just so satisfying starting with basic abilities in a limited map, and eventually ending the game with a big map with cool new abilities. Like in other games like The Lost Crown, there are little checkpoints that you can find throughout the map that act as a spot to save, heal, and access your abilities. In The Lost Crown, you can add special amulets to Sargon. These are little charms that you can acquire during your playthrough that will give you little bonuses like increased health or adding a little explosion after a certain ability. These are a treat to find and discover. However, I mainly just stuck with a set and I didn't really change much outside of that. I will say that it is really sweet that you are able to upgrade most of the amulets, which significantly helps throughout the playthrough. Along with amulets, you can also buy upgrades for Sargon at the main hub. You can talk to a blacksmith that can improve sword and bow damage, or talk with a merchant that can give you the ability to hold more potions. I love me some hub areas in games, especially in Metroidvanias, and while you can't really do much outside of shop and train, it's still really cool to have an area where you can chill. The main meat of this game is the massive map that you will have to explore, and I must say that there are some very unique areas, and it's a breath of fresh air. I won't spoil all of the areas, but there is a point where you can go into the catacombs where it is pitch black, or this area you can explore where the ocean is frozen in time. How cool is that? Especially when the franchise is centered around the theme of time. Speaking of time, the abilities that Sargon acquires are based on some kind of time distortion. You can place a point and teleport to get out of harm's way, you can dash through the air, or even pocket a bomb like you're a villager from Animal Crossing. I love most of these abilities. Some are better utilized than others, but these abilities are at their best when they're paired with the puzzles in the game. The puzzles are so fun. There are puzzles based on platforming around certain traps, and there are puzzles that test your abilities. I love the puzzles in this game, especially when you have to incorporate your teleport ability. That is just so fun to do. There is one new mechanic introduced that just might be one of the best new inclusions to the Metroidvania genre that we've seen in a while, and that mechanic is the memory shards. The way memory shards work is it's basically a quick picture that you take when you see a locked area that you can't access yet. Once you take the picture, it then adds to your map and you can view it at any time. This is a fantastic addition because once you get a new ability, you can go look at your map and see which areas you can access with that ability instead of just going around guessing. This is a genius move and it really helps make backtracking less annoying. The combat is very flashy and it is so fun. Metroidvanias normally have quite a bit of action, but The Lost Crown is just as much an action game as it is a platformer. You can pull off combos, some of which let you lift up enemies in the air and do air combos. Sargon has two main weapons. He can dual wield swords and eventually obtain a bow. The bow is great for reaching enemies that fly, but I gotta admit that I wish there was a bit more you could do with the bow. If you hold the button that is used for your bow, then you can transform it into a chakram. With this, you can send it out and have it return to you like a boomerang. And that is really cool, but I just didn't really find that much use for it. I mostly just stuck with the bow. And using the bow is cool and all, but there's just not a lot of versatility when it comes to it. I mean, I would argue that chakram has more versatility because you can parry the chakram back at enemies, which is really cool. But it's a little hard to pull off and you're not going to be doing it too much, especially during like big boss battles. But I did find myself doing it a little bit. It just takes some getting practice. While the chakram can be used for combat, it can also be used for puzzles. And I think the puzzles is where the chakram shines the most. I don't know, I feel like the puzzles go really well with the chakram. You can also parry incoming attacks, and if you parry an enemy attack that is glowing yellow, you can do a stylish kill that is so visually striking, it never gets old. This parry can also be done in boss fights. These are especially cool and cinematic. Sargon goes all anime and it looks incredible. How does a Ubisoft game go this hard? The boss fights in general are pretty fun. Some are better than others. Like some of the boss fights at the beginning of the game act as big punching bags with little strategy to them, but they eventually get more difficult and more complex. Like in other challenging Metroidvanias, the bosses might seem more beyond your skill level, but you just gotta give it a couple more tries, or if you're like me, numerous more times, to memorize the enemy's attack pattern. Speaking of enemies, I really like the amount of enemy types that are in Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. It's nice to have a good variety of foes to slice through. The music is a joy to listen to. The two composers who worked on this title is Gareth and Mentrix. Gareth in particular may be familiar to some of you because he is also the composer behind the beautiful Ori and the Blind Forest and Ori Will of the Wisp. So yeah, no wonder the soundtrack sounds so good. The other composer, Mentrix, is known for her unique electronic sound, and she integrates some cool beats into the music. She also adds a much needed flavor to the music. I think the soundtrack would lack her touch. She really adds that Middle Eastern flair that this game needs. The soundtrack as a whole is great, but the standout tracks were the boss fights. There is just so much to love here. I am really enjoying the soundtrack, and even if you don't pick up the game, I recommend at least checking out some of the music. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is a fantastic game through and through. The combat is fast and flashy, there is a nice visual variety in regions, going beyond the standard forest, lava, ice biomes, and the story has some unexpected depth to it. There are some twists and turns I wasn't expecting. I enjoyed both Sargon and the main antagonist. The rest of the cast weren't up on the same level, but they did a fine enough job for the game. The Lost Crown is easily one of my favorite games of the year, and we are just getting started. I highly recommend giving this Metroidvania a try if you are any kind of fan of this genre. Thank you for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. God bless.